Hello everyone and welcome to One Team Inertia's Big Fat End of Season Review for Season 21-22, where we clinch the championship in the second last game of the season after a roller coaster month at the end of the season and a roller coaster throughout the year, let's be honest. This is going to be our end of season review and we're going to look forward to doing our preview for next season and our new podcast every week between games, reviewing and previewing the games. With some new faces on the channel alongside myself, Kieran Calderwood and Andrew Milligan will both be joining me every week, as well as in the commentary box for our games as well. So thanks both for coming on, and I look forward to chatting all things Kelly with you this season.
Definitely, thanks for having us. It's going to be fun, hopefully, this season.
Let's hope so. Fantastic. So just a short podcast tonight. We're going to be taking a quick look back at the season, the sort of main talking points. The sort of the Tommy Wright era of the season, and then Derek McInnes coming in, and then those final couple of games and all the tension that came with that. And then we'll be taking a quick look at our end of season awards, which we already ran on Twitter. About 500 fans voting in that, and we'll take a quick discussion of who won that, who the nominees, and if we think the fans made the correct decision on that or not. So without further ado, we'll go straight into it, and we'll start at the beginning. Starting the season under Tommy Wright. He stayed on, of course, after overseeing our relegation in the playoff final to Dundee just a couple of months before. And he had an okay start to the season, maybe not as quick as we would want, but we were sort of level with Inverness and we were right up there. And then as we approached Christmas, Kieran, it sort of started getting pretty bad, and we sort of slipped down to fifth in the table at one point, and the board decided to sort of cut their losses and run. A two-part question, really. Do you think that was the right decision? And you know, where did it all go wrong for Tommy Wright as a Kelly manager? Because he just never really seemed to get the fans on side, and it just never really seemed to work for him.
Yeah, it was a strange kind of spell having Tommy Wright at Kelly, because you could almost say that he was more popular after we got relegated from the Premiership. You know, at the time, bringing Kyle Laverty in. It was absolutely on fire, still is, to be fair. It was on fire towards the tail end of the previous season in the Premiership. Scored plenty of goals, but just in the end wasn't enough. Got us relegated. Kudos to Tommy Wright for sticking around, sticking it through to try and rectify. It wasn't even his problem that he created, but he stuck around all the same. The situation was kind of a sinking ship at the time. Relegation, never really fun to stick around with. But he did. He tried his best, and I'd definitely say around about the time, as you mentioned, dropping down into fourth place in the championship wasn't where we wanted to be, wasn't where we needed to be. So I'd say around about the time, definitely a correct decision to cut the losses, just as you said, because something was needed. And you were asking what went wrong for him. It's quite hard to put your finger on. He never seemed not settled or that. It just didn't feel like. Obviously, when we think about Kelly managers, we like to think back to Steve Clark. A good staple, got us a real strong position. It was weird. Tommy Wright just never really sank in, I feel, for most Kelly fans. Just didn't really win over the support, and it was unfortunate for him what happened, but it had to be done.
Yeah, Andrew, do you agree with that? And do you think, looking back on it as we have now across the whole season, if Tommy Wright was given the whole season, do you think he would have got us promoted, or was it the right decision in the end?
It's a really tough one to say on whether he would have made the switch or whether he'd been able to make the jump to get us back up. I think we probably did get rid of him at the right time, because performances had dropped, results had dropped, the fans had started to turn against him. We saw that in many games at the end of the game, with fans shouting abuse at them or whatever. And rightly so, he would give his own bit back, and he's had stuff to say about that since. But no, I think it was definitely the right decision to make, because there was a lot of optimism coming into the season. Obviously dropping to another league, and the budget we have compared to other teams, but it was never going to be easy. We're never going to just throw the league. That it was just never going to happen. It wasn't a realistic thing to expect. So, I thought at the start of the season it was definitely right to keep him on. And I thought he would be able to get us back up, but it's hard to tell whether he'd be able to do that or not. But obviously, with what Derek McInnes has done since he came in, definitely the right decision to let him go when we did. because the previous season we didn't do it quick enough with Alex Dyer, and we saw what happened to ourselves then. So probably best we did it when we did.
Yeah, and then we were searching for a manager, well, for quite a long time, to be perfectly honest, and in the end it was obviously Derek McInnes that came in, which Kelly fans thought at the time was a big scoop for the club, and probably still do. A manager of his stature, what he achieved at Aberdeen, at St Johnstone, even down at as a player down south as well. I think was a huge appointment, and it proved to be the correct one, and he did get us there in the end, but it certainly wasn't without his struggles. And although there was maybe a little upturn in form when he first came into the job, I don't think it was as smooth sailing as perhaps he would have wanted, or as Kilmarnock fans would have wanted. And there were times even during the McInnes, that the second part of the season under McInnes, that the Kelly fans felt was slipping away from us again, and we were down in second, and at times, and every time it looked like we could capitalise on what other team, on the poor form of other teams, we just kept slipping up, and it just didn't seem like it was going to be for us to do. We eventually did, but if you look back on it, Andrew, did we make it hard for ourselves in that second half of the season, or is the championship just so competitive that it is hard to win, week in, week out, even with the sort of disparity that Kelly had in terms of the size of the club, the budget, and the players that we had at our disposal? Oh, sorry, we've lost Andrew a wee bit. We'll go to you, Kieran, instead.
I would say definitely it was made much more difficult. I think the Kelly players just didn't take the pressure of being league favourites. Right from the get-go, the second we were relegated, everyone was saying that Kilmarnock, the top dogs in this league, shouldn't be struggling. But as you said, there was definitely other elements at play. That was probably not that I've paid attention to the championship too much, but I'd say that was a very competitive league from the experiences that we faced. And week in, week out, going to the games, commentating on them, we got to see some real good team performances from opponents' team as well. We had several star performances from opposition players throughout, particularly in between the posts, causing a lot of frustrations throughout that tail end of the season. But I feel like what got us through the end there was Derek McInnes, who he is. He came with a lot of class behind him, a lot of approval. Spent so much time at Aberdeen, got them to a real solid position to where they are now. Is one of the big teams outside of the old firm, and then he brought all that with him to Kilmarnock. Admittedly, as you said, he didn't have. He had a fairly clean start. You wouldn't complain too much if that was back at the start of the season. He was performing like that, getting those kind of results. But at that late stage in the season, when we were trailing like we were, and then I can't remember what game it was, but I think it was the first draw he got, and the ball just dropped, and everyone realised this might not happen. We might actually have to stay down here for 2 seasons. But as we were saying, got the job done. Can't really complain too much about it. But there was definitely moments throughout that second half of the season when Kilmarnock shot themselves in the foot on more than one occasion.
Andrew, how big an impact do you think that favourites tag had on Kelly? Obviously, being the biggest team in the league, something we're obviously not used to. Being the scalp in the league, essentially, where every team we came up against would try 110, 120% against us, just put in that extra bit because we were the big team, because they wanted to beat us. Do you think sometimes, especially in the first half of the season, maybe we struggled to deal with the pressure of that?
Yeah, I think so, definitely. We had many times, we've been used to being in the Premiership, where it's the total opposite. We're the underdogs going against the big teams, your Celtic, your Rangers, your Edinburgh teams and stuff like that. Whereas we've had to come down to the Championship, where, as you said, we were given the tag of favourites. So, any team that was coming up against us was seen as the underdog. So they, as you said, they're all against us, and that's just a lot of the time. We would struggle to break down teams on multiple occasions, and then we would push forward to try and get goals and end up conceding late on at the back. So it did really hurt us at times during the season. We struggled to deal with this almost pressure we had on us to make sure we got back up. I mean, thankfully we have got back up, but can you imagine what kind of state would have been in if we hadn't been able to get back up? If we hadn't won the title? Not to be a pessimist, I'm not too sure how we would have fared in the playoffs. So, it was so important that we got the league title, and obviously we had that magical night at Rugby Park. So, thankfully we got over the line, but I think the favourites tag definitely did hinder us a few times over the season.
Yeah, and I think looking back on the season, Kieran, I think we're all a bit worried about going down to the championship because we knew it was going to be hard, and we knew that if we didn't get out the first time, we were going to be in big trouble because we were basically, Billy Bowie said himself, he was putting all of our resources into this one season in the hopes that we would get back up, and the fear was that if we didn't, then the club would have to downsize in a major way. We'd have to sort of rethink about who we were. And the sort of resources we were putting into the club. So to get back up the first time of asking was massive. But obviously with the pressure, off us now, and obviously we're being promoted. How do you look back on the season as a whole? Was it enjoyable? Winning, almost every week and going to games knowing, every game's important, and especially getting towards the end of the season, we're getting the big supports and the big crowds. Every game was massive. Was it enjoyable from that aspect, or are you still looking back up to the Premiership and thinking, that's where we want to be?
It was quite enjoyable. It was something I never thought that we'd not see, but I didn't think it would happen like so soon. I didn't think Kilmarnock would have dropped the form like that and end up in the Championship. It wasn't really something I'd thought of. I always seen ourselves as as Andrew and yourself have both said, Premiership underdogs. Going to the bigger teams, putting on a good show. Just floating about and just enjoying ourselves in the Premiership. But going down to the Championship, it was such a different dynamic. Everyone, just all the teams from top to bottom, just were so desperate for points, and you could feel that game in, game out. Although we were winning the games, it was never easy. There were no easy games in that league. I'm pretty sure there was, apart from the one game in particular against Ayr when we bagged 3 goals early on, there was no complete shutouts from Kilmarnock. There was always like an air of we might lose this, we might draw this, we might drop silly points here. And with the the other 3 teams just on our heels for a lot of the season, obviously Inverness dropped off a bit, Raith Rovers dropped off a little bit towards the end, but Arbroath stayed right on till the end. And if I wasn't a Kilmarnock fan watching that would have been very entertaining. It was compared to quite a lot as kind of similar to Leicester kind of situation, in the Premier League, chasing the big dogs for that top spot. Of course, it was a little bit less than that, but Arbroath, their fairy tale that they had, it was quite unfortunate for them what happened. It's after we defeated them, got the championship title. I was hoping that they would have pulled through and maybe came up to the end, but those were some very mean playoffs. And I agree with Andrew. I don't really know how we would have fared in those, because St Johnstone were a different animal over those 2 final legs. They really pulled out the last minute, the lifeline that they needed to stay up in the Premiership, and it was quite enjoyable. And you were saying, Adam, about the big crowd, seeing them back in Kilmarnock. It was quite something. We hadn't seen a crowd like that since that last day against Rangers. Just a full, packed out to the brim Rugby Park, completely screaming all the songs. It was quite magical to see, and it was great to be there, experience that last minute winner, Blair Alston. It's definitely a highlight for me, and don't think I'll soon forget it.
No, absolutely no. And Andrew, how do you look back on the season then? Are you happy that you got to see something a bit different, and you got to see Kelly winning a league sort of in your lifetime, which may or may not ever happen again, or would you just rather it hadn't happened at all, and we're just still in the just about to head into our 30th or our 27th season in the Premiership? We've lost Andrew a bit again, but we'll come back to you. But Andrew, we'll move on to the end of season awards. So we put this out on Twitter a couple of days ago, and over 500 Killie fans responded to each. So that was fantastic. We had five categories for it: Player of the Season, Young Player of the Season, Game of the Season, Goal of the Season, and Signing of the Season. A couple of overlaps in them, as you would expect. Not really any shocks, you'd have to say, in the overall result, but we'll go through them one by one, and you two might have some different opinions on that. So, Player of the Season, it was between Rory McKenzie, Zach Hemming, Kyle Lafferty, and Fraser Murray. Rory McKenzie, more or less taking a sweep there, getting by far and away the majority. But Zach Kevin also picking up quite a few as well. Andrew, do you think that was well worthy? Obviously, Rory McKenzie had a huge season this year, to be honest. Always comes in for criticism, but this year you think when the club needed someone in the league that knew what it meant to be a Killie player, he really stepped up, didn't he?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think it could have been any of those, really, but Rory had to be. I think he's one of those players where when he plays, you don't really appreciate his quality. It's when he's not in the team when you really appreciate him most, and he comes back in the next week or whenever it may be, and you realise just how good he is and how important he is for our team. And as you said yourself, it's so important to have someone around the club and in the team who understands what it means to play for Killie. Obviously, with Chris Burke as well, but Rory's a lifetime Kilmarnock fan, grew up in the area and everything, and has been here for years and years now. So he understands it, and it was so important to have that, because obviously with the big turnaround we had from last season's squad to this season's squad, it was so important to keep people who knew the club, and Rory's the prime example of that. And his performances week in, week out when he played top notch. And as you said, he still somehow has his critics who don't appreciate his real quality. But no, definitely for me, I agree with that vote.
Yeah, Kieran, over 300 appearances now for Rory McKenzie in all competitions. Coming up to his testimonial, you would hope. He did have a chance to move away from Killie a couple of seasons ago. Tommy Wright was actually interested in him, and St Johnstone chose not to go. How vital is he, not just to Kilmarnock this season, but generally, to have that face at the club every single year, for the players that come in, someone who knows the club, knows the area, knows everything there is to know. How big an influence do you think he is on everyone in that dressing room?
I'd say he's massive. I don't think you can really measure how important Rory McKenzie is to that Kilmarnock team. As you were saying, Andrew, he's been there. He's always been there. He knows what it means. Even yourself, Adam, saying that as well. He's been there every single season. When I think back to Killie players in my head, it's always Rory McKenzie. That's the player that always sticks out in my mind. He's been there so long. He's played so many matches, and I just said 300 games for Kilmarnock, well over that. He's so important. His versatility to the team was put well on display this season. He was playing through the middle, out wide. Pretty sure he even played as a defender on a few occasions as well. He was all over that pitch in every single game. Just knocked his pan in, running up and down that pitch. Just couldn't care. Wanted the ball, wanted to drive forward for Kilmarnock, put in the good performances, and I definitely agree with that vote. But Zach Hemming, a very close second, I would say, for me personally.
Yeah, absolutely. Zach Kevin does get the nod for the next one, but just to mention two of the other nominations there, Kyle Lafferty and Fraser Murray as well. Fraser Murray obviously won Player of the Year from the club, which was maybe a surprise to many, but I think they were trying to share the awards out. But he had a fantastic season as well. Obviously started off a wee bit slowly, and there was criticism of him, but fair play to him, because he played through that. He kept going, and especially in the final 2 or 3 months of the season, he was a standout player. He was the one that you were looking at, to make something happen, and he really came onto a game. So fair play to Fraser Murray and Kyle Lafferty as well. I mean, what can we say about him? He came in back in January, which was brave of him, because the way it sort of he left. There was the whole thing about him perhaps wanting too much money. We don't know what the truth was behind that, but he did leave under a wee bit of a cloud, which was a shame, because he did such a good job for us last season, or the season before rather. And then coming back in January, he clicked again like that, didn't he? Scored a couple of vital goals, those two ones against the Birmingham especially, when he really turned the game round. He had that overhead kick in that game as well, and he's been a massive influence as well. Maybe didn't quite have the goals to game ratio that he had in his first spell with us, but certainly another vital part of the team, and well worthy of a nomination there. So move on to Young Player of the Season. The nominations were Zach Hemming, Fraser Murray, Charlie MacArthur, and Jack Sanders. And to be honest, it was only ever going to go one way, and it really proved to be that. Zach Hemming, it's always a bit risky when you bring in young goalkeepers on loan, especially two of them, like we did with Zach Hemming and Sam Walker. But to be fair, both of them, and especially Zach Hemming, he looks like he's played for 5 more years than he actually has. He is a fantastic goalkeeper, Andrew, and was a huge part of us winning the league this season. So many saves, penalty saves as well. So many huge moments that he kept the ball out of the net, and ultimately helped us collect so many points. once again, can't hear Andrew, so we'll come to Kieran first.
Yeah, Zach Hemming. I don't really think there's much more I could say about him that has already been said throughout the season. As you're saying, Adam carries himself like a goalkeeper with so many more years of experience under his belt. Of course, had a few moments, as you said as well, but who doesn't really have mistakes? You know, he's only human. He's still young. I think he's 21 years of age, 22, and to do what he did was phenomenal. Week in, week out, he was there from start to finish of that championship season, and he really bailed us out on several occasions. Unfortunately, you know, couldn't get a little bit more progress in some of like the other competitions. You know, the cup for the actual championship. A little bit of a bow out early. I believe that was due to one of his fumbles. But end of the day, can't really complain about him at all. He was absolutely phenomenal. And the only thing I can say is I wish him back very swiftly. But I get the feeling that's probably not going to happen, unfortunately.
Yeah, it wasn't just on the pitch either, Andrew, was it? It was off the pitch as well. He was always involved in things for the club and the community, turning up to the Killie ladies games as well. I mean, he really sort of, you know, got himself involved in the community, in the town, and the fans, to be honest, really appreciated that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when you get a lone player in, the least you expect is a bit, you know, an effort to play like a player that's signed to the club on a permanent basis. But obviously, you know, he went above and beyond that, and I think we've run out of words to describe that man. And as you can say, off the pitch as well, you know, him with his family and his 2 kids now as well, of course. So yeah, I mean, they just really embraced the Kilmarnock family, and that's what the fans love. The fans love to see that. You know, we've seen that in the past with a few other lone players, but you know, Zach Hemming was definitely one of the ones to embrace the most from through my lifetime. Anyway, he's, yeah, as Kieran said, I'd love to have him back next season. We all would, but I'm not going to keep my fingers crossed for that one. I know he's back up in Scotland today. I think probably seeing some old mates that he's made from his time up here, which I think just shows, you know, how much he embraced this. He didn't just come in, play in the pitch for 90 minutes, do his training. He was out enjoying the local area, making friends and talking to fans, and on social media as well. Loads of social media tweets and Instagram posts. You know, I remember one when we beat Ayr United at their place and the certain location that he tagged Ayr United Stadium for. You know, it's just loads of things like that. It was really amazing to see, and yeah, top goalkeeper.
Yeah, absolutely. We've certainly been blessed by a large number of quality goalkeepers in the last couple of years, and certainly think he's going to be one to go on to much bigger things in the next couple of years. So congratulations to Zach for that one, and there are nominations for that: Fraser Murray, Charlie MacArthur, and Jack Sanders. Fraser Murray I've already mentioned, but Charlie MacArthur always said about a breakthrough year. Played a couple of times, always looked very, very composed. A really good player in the making. Obviously the captain for the youth Scotland side as well. So a really, really good prospect for us. And Jack Sanders as well, I think was one of the surprises of the season, to be honest. Don't know how you two feel, but you know, a young guy perhaps didn't have the best of starts. I think his first game he was a bit shaky and he maybe made a couple of mistakes, but since then, every game that he played, he turned into one of our best defenders, to be honest, didn't he?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I love Jack Sanders. He's brilliant. As you said, you know, despite the shaky start, he, you know, really improved very quickly. And as you said, just young as well. That was the same thing with Zach as well. You know, young despite his mistakes. So, you know, he was really composed coming the back end of the season. Really important especially when we got injuries such as Ash Taylor and Chris Stokes. He never felt fear when he came into the side. You know, he was always capable of stepping in. You wouldn't fear too much, especially as well if you had to come on off the bench and see out a 2-0 lead or 1-goal lead, whatever it may be. You know, you felt that security with him, which, you know, can't be underappreciated. So yeah, definitely a worthy nominee for sure.
Absolutely. And we move on to the third to the 5 awards game of the season. I don't think it's any surprise which one came out on top, but the 4 nominations were pretty easy, to be honest. There's 4 sort of standout games. Killie 2-1 are both, of course, in the second last game of the season. The other nominations, the 3-1 victory over Ayr, as Kieran touched on earlier, the 2-1 victory over Dunfermline at home, which was one where Kyle Lafferty scored those 2 late goals, including the overhead kick. And the first game away to Ayr with Ollie Shaw's last minute penalty when we won 1-0. Kieran, I think it was always going to be their both game, but you look back on all those games, there's some good times this season.
Oh, definitely. I think it probably doesn't quite scratch on some of our better moments getting to commentate on the games, but definitely as far as the championship goes, it has been quite a fun roller coaster, as you described it earlier, of emotions. Even the low points, because there was always that hope that we'd bounce back from it, and those very sweet victories against Ayr can never be undervalued, especially the 3-1 romping. Which will remain a personal favourite of mine, but nothing's going to beat that game against the Arbroath last minute winners from Blair Alston. Long live that in my memory.
Yeah, Andrew, I think obviously we all want to sort of not forget the championship season, but we'd rather move past it and focus back at the Premiership. But for that game against Arbroath, that'll be in the memory for a long time for all Kelly fans.
Special mention to that Kilmarnock 2-1 victory over Fairmont at home. I think that was a real turning point for our team. 1-0 down, but it was 20 minutes to go. Fairmont to go to get 2 goals. It was a victory, such an important victory that day. Perhaps the turning point for the season that pushed us to the title.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we say, there's never any doubt that game was going to win. But certainly, as we say, many good memories, some of which we'll already have forgotten. But as we say, almost every game was a thrill, to be honest, because it was so close and every game meant so much. So, no, fantastic for that one. And goal of the season, once again, it was only ever going to be one winner, but so some honourable nominations for apart from the Alston versus Arbroath goal Lafferty against Dunfermline, which was the overhead kick that we were talking about earlier. Ollie Shaw versus Wraitham, last game of the season, that one a technically very, very good goal. And I think the fact that Ollie Shaw actually scored a one-on-one with the goalkeeper makes it a worthy inclusion in itself, because that was a very rare moment. And Ken Lafferty again, the free kick against Partick from the edge of the box, that was a bit of a stunner as well. Kieran, it was only ever going to be that Alston goal versus Arbroath, but we have been treated to some good ones this season.
Some very, very good goals all throughout the season. But yeah, Blair Alston's goal, definitely the number one contender for that whole season. Technically as well, it was a great finish from Blair Alston. It was a really difficult opportunity, great, close control in the box, and all of a sudden he slipped it past the goalkeeper, and it's 2-1, and the whole stadium just goes into complete pandemonium, including us three as well. Very definitely a very good memory in the mind. I don't know quite where it ranks next to the 2-1 Celtic, 2-1 Rangers results, but it's definitely quite high up there, winning a trophy, the first trophy that we've had since back in the Scottish Cup. So definitely the Blair Alston goal, an absolutely fantastic goal, well worthy of the award. But as you said, plenty of other good choices throughout the season. I remember Ollie Shaw against, I believe it was Partick Thistle, scoring from outside the box. Quite some distance on it as well. It was a fantastic goal, but definitely Blair Alston.
Yeah, do you agree, Andrew? Obviously, a bit of an obvious one that the fans were going to choose that one, but at the end of the day, as well as a very important goal, as Kieran said, it was a very technically good goal from Blair Alston, and not necessarily something we'd seen from him so far this season. And it was a bit of a surprise, but there's only ever going to be one winner.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there was a worry it wasn't going to go in at first when they made the contact with it, but thankfully it did. But there was other nominations as well, of course, but just due to the moment of it as well, it was always going to be number one choice. But I think that, as you said, that Ollie Shaw goal in the last game of the season, I'm not sure we've seen many technical goals like that from Kilmarnock as of late. So it was a really good goal in the movement with it. And as you said, of course, Ollie Shaw finishing a one-on-one chance, which we didn't see him do against Arbroath. When he had a chance to make it 3, he managed to put it past the post. So yeah, really good goal there as well. But of course, only ever going to be one winner.
Yeah, absolutely. And the signing of the season, which is a bit more hotly contested because, I mean, there were some big signings that really turned the season around. And those are who we're kind of looking at. Zach Hemming, of course, coming in at the start of the season. Kevin Lafferty coming in halfway through. Ash Taylor coming in halfway through as well. Those are two that really transformed our fortunes on the pitch, you would have to say. Off the pitch, Derek McInnes we included in the poll as well because although he is technically a signing by Billy Bowie into a different position, and he had a massive impact there. But the winner overall, picking up his second award, was Zach Hemming. And Kieran, do you think that was well deserved by Zach Hemming, or could it have been any of the others because they all had a very big impact?
I'd definitely say Zach Hemming quite high up there on that list of earning that. Just the time as well, the timing of his signing right bang at the beginning of the season, so he was with us right the way through, just pulling out good performance after good performance. As we earlier mentioned, he had a few mistakes, but those are long forgotten. I'm sure he'll remember them, and it'll just make him a much better goalkeeper going into the future. But just to tap on a few of the other names in there as well, a lot of the signings, a good majority of the ones that Tommy Wright did bring in himself. Stephen McGinn, for example, a real fantastic signing, didn't really come into a strong performance till a little bit later on in the season. But when Derek McInnes rolled in, he just suddenly revived a lot of the signings that we thought were long gone and forgotten. Of course, brought in a few of his own as well. Ash Taylor, the most notable rather. It was an absolute solid centre half throughout the tail end of that season. Really led that back line when it had kind of been lacking a little bit of leadership in that situation. But to go back to the actual award winner himself, Zach Hemming, can't really complain too much about that at all. Just what he brought to the table, the amount of points he himself saved, quite literally and figuratively, was just absolutely priceless.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked about Lafferty, and you just talked about Ash Taylor there, Kieran. But off the pitch, Andrew, the signing of and the bringing in of Derek McInnes. Yes, you could have brought in these players that we're talking about, and they may well have transformed the season, but they could not have done it without the leadership and the experience of Derek McInnes. What do you think he actually brought to Kilmarnock that made such a big change that propelled us towards the title? Because at the end of the day, a manager is just a man that gives out instructions, but it's the way that they do it. And what do you think that he brought in particular that they got the best out of these players, as Kieran said, that perhaps hadn't performed that well in the first half of the season? Stephen McGinn, Fraser Murray, Blair Olsen, even to name but a few. What did he actually do to make these players so much better?
A vast amount of experience working at the highest level with Aberdeen for many years. I think there was a surprise when he joined us, to be honest, amongst us, because we didn't expect him to make the jump down to the Championship, but he did. Fair play to him. I mean, it worked out. He believed in himself. I think that he had a belief in himself that he could come in and turn it around and get his fourth league title, and that's exactly what he did. I think he had this attitude that he wouldn't take anything less than 100%, and when he was speaking in his interviews, he always spoke with full truth. I think that's something that fans really appreciated. They didn't feel like he was sugarcoating anything. Even if it was after a poor performance, they would come out and say it as it is. They wouldn't try and sugarcoat a poor performance or a poor result. He would come out and admit it, and maybe if it was his mistake or that, he would come out and admit that as well. But I think he really instilled that confidence in the players, because as you say, so many players, McGinn, Alston, Murray, as you mentioned, and more as well, I'm sure, it really came onto a different game. They looked like different players under McInnes as they did under Tommy Wright. Not saying there were poor players under Tommy Wright, but there was a clear difference under McInnes, and fair play to him. He really pushed us onto that league title.
Yeah, fantastic. So we're almost done for our end of season review podcast. And this might be a bit of a silly question, but if you could both choose one moment from the season that you'll sort of remember, and I think I know what you're going to say anyway, but you can maybe surprise me. One moment that will stay with you from the season in the Championship. What would it be, Kieran? Starting with you.
Well, I think the obvious answer you'd probably say is the 2-1 against Arbroath. That would definitely always be there. But there was a lot of moments throughout that season. I earlier mentioned, you can never really undervalue a good wee win against Ayr, because we don't get to see them too often. Of course, we had that one game against them that we won't talk about. But Definitely those games as well. It's very rare for us to have a derby that we actually feel quite passionately about. They've obviously got a couple of wee things here and there just based on kind of distance for the Premiership, but that was a proper Ayrshire derby. Definitely, those will stick in my mind. Didn't get to experience many in my time being a Kilmarnock supporter, so to have like a whole season's worth of them, that was a very strong memory that will stay up there. Especially the 3 goals and a red card for them in 20 or so minutes. So that will stick up there, but probably has to be Blair Alston raising the roof and just cueing the scenes and seeing that trophy getting lifted out at Rugby Park, getting hoisted up by each and every single one of those players. Definitely a good, strong memory for me.
Yeah, and Andrew, I imagine you're exactly the same.
Yeah, I mean, it would have to be that last game of the season. I would be a true Kelly fan if I didn't choose that. But to just make some other honourable mentions, obviously, as Kieran touched on, that Ayrshire derby, getting 3 quick goals, it's unbelievable. We couldn't believe what we were seeing when the goals were going in. I touched on the 2-1 against Fairland earlier, where it felt like a turning point of our season. In February, I was just confirming the score. It was 3-0, I thought it was. Beating Wraith Rovers at home 3-0, when Kyle Lafferty got 2 and McGinn got 1 as well. That game was probably our first game under McInnes where it was just a full total domination, and despite it being 3-0, it could have easily been 5 or 6 that day, and it was the first performance under Derek McInnes where we just saw total domination from us, and that was a real positive to see. So a lot of honourable mentions, but definitely could never beat that final day of the season. Second final game of the season to win the league title.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, fantastic. Well, I think that's the season well and truly reviewed. A fantastic season, as we said in the end. It's a bit of a roller coaster, but they got over the line in the end, and we're looking forward to Premiership football next season. So thanks everyone for tuning in, and as we say, we'll be back with our season preview podcast in a couple of weeks' time, and hopefully we'll have podcasts every single week throughout the season as we chart the highs and lows of our return. Hopefully a successful return to the Premiership. We're also going to be hoping to have a couple of different videos out over the course of over the next couple of months or so as we start preparing for games again, and we'll be doing some Twitter Spaces as well. So make sure you tune in for those, and we'll have a good discussion, and we can take fans' questions as well. So my thanks to Kieran and Andrew for coming on for the first time, hopefully the first time of many, and hopefully we've brought some smiles from remembering what was a great season in the Championship. So thanks both for coming on.
Yeah, no problem at all. Thanks for having me again. I'm sure Andrew would say the same as well. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And as always, you can find us on Twitter at One Team Ayrshire. Get us on YouTube where you are just now. Make sure you subscribe to that and all the other stuff. So thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll speak to you in the next podcast, which should be our season preview podcast coming up just before the League Cup games, which begin in July. So thank you very much for watching, and goodbye from all of us.